Michael Hunter and Deontay Wilder were teammates back in the amateurs. They were trying to qualify for the 2008 Beijing Olympics, representing the United States, of course. Deontay Wilder at heavyweight, which in the amateurs is 200 pounds, the equivalent of cruiserweight in the pros. And Michael Hunter was trying to qualify at super heavyweight, which is anything above 200 pounds. Now, Wilder was successful. He got into the Beijing Olympics and medaled. He got a bronze. Michael Hunter was not successful. He lost to a Cuban in the Olympic qualifiers. Nonetheless, in this interview, Michael Hunter reveals that him and Deontay sparred extensively during that period, and he infers that he was so dominant in those sparring sessions against Wilder that if they fought as pros, he believes he would stop Deontay Wilder early. Now, a lot of fans are disappointed in Michael Hunter. I'm extremely disappointed in him because he didn't take the Filip Hrgović fight when it was offered to him. Now, obviously, fighters turn down fights for a variety of different reasons, and in some cases it's understandable. But in this particular case, we've got a guy in Michael Hunter who wanted the public to believe that he was willing to take any fight against any of the top guys, any of the up-and-coming guys. And he even said that he'd be willing to fight for free. This is how bold Michael Hunter has been in terms of trying to stake his claim as one of the top heavyweights, verbally outside the ring. When it comes to following it through inside the ring, yes, he's had some decent fights. You know, he took Martin Bakoli's unbeaten record. He had that draw with Povetkin, which I thought he was slightly unfortunate not to get the win in, and so on. He also beat Sergey Kuzmin. I think he took his unbeaten record. So he's got some decent wins on his record so far. But the Hrgović fight would have taken him to the next level. Not only because Filip Hrgović is a very highly touted prospect / contender with an extensive amateur background. He was in the WSB and so on. But also because it was a world title eliminator for the IBF belt. And Michael Hunter would have had the lion's share of the purse because he was more highly ranked than Hrgović. And he decided to turn that opportunity down. The guy who said he would fight certain people for free, he didn't want to fight Hrgović for, I believe, what would have been a career high payday for him and the opportunity to become mandatory. And the IBF tend to be very strict when it comes to enforcing their mandatories. So there's a possibility that he would have got a title shot being IBF mandatory more quickly than if he was WBC, WBO, or WBA mandatory. He threw that opportunity away. So I'm not happy about that. I'm disappointed, and I know many of you are as well. And as you can see from the dislikes on this video, his reputation has really suffered because of not following through on his promises with regards to taking these kind of fights. With that being said, I still rate Michael Hunter highly as a fighter. Okay? He's made a decision that I'm not happy about, but it doesn't mean all of a sudden that I don't rate him. All of a sudden, I'm going to pick everybody against him. No, that wouldn't be logical. I don't let emotions interfere with my analysis of fighters. So, with Michael Hunter talking about he would stop Deontay Wilder early, I'd be very surprised if he could do that. I'd be very impressed if he could beat Deontay Wilder at all. I think he's got a very good chance of beating Wilder. In fact, if they were to fight anytime soon, let's say over the next year, I may even pick Hunter in that fight. Styles make fights. Hunter has been fighting big guys his whole life. It's not a shock to him to be in there with a man who can punch a hole in a wall, okay? And the speed that Michael Hunter has, the foot speed, the hand speed, the dexterity. He's not a massive puncher, but I certainly think he can get your respect with his power. And I think he is a dark horse in the heavyweight division still. And in fact, the Hrgović situation and the backlash that Michael Hunter is getting, in a funny way, could actually play into his hands, because he will be underestimated now even more than he was before. People are underestimating him because he's a small heavyweight, he couldn't stop Povetkin, all this kind of stuff. They'll underestimate him even more now because of the fact that a lot of people don't like him. This will, in my view, increase the chances that he's going to pull off at least one major upset. And he's already pulled off a bit of an upset against Martin Bakole, right? Obviously, Martin Bakole wasn't at the level of some of the fighters I'm talking about here, but it was still an upset within the trade. But I'm talking about a much bigger upset. I'm talking about him taking a much bigger scalp than Martin Bakole. I'm still predicting that that is going to happen. Michael Hunter's going to do that. I'm not sure who it's going to be. We'll see who he's matched against. But I still believe that this is a dark horse in the heavyweight division. Now, I want to show you guys something about Michael Hunter's amateur background. Some of you may know that he fought a lot of top names in the amateurs. A lot of you will dismiss it all and say, oh, that's amateur boxing, it doesn't mean anything. Well, amateur boxing and professional boxing are obviously very different. But to act as though amateur boxing means nothing, well, why is it that most top-level fighters have extensive amateur backgrounds? Not all of them, but the vast majority of them. People who don't have these extensive amateur backgrounds tend not to be as successful in the pros. This is just a fact. So to say amateur boxing means nothing, that's not supported by the evidence. And not only does amateur boxing mean something, not only is it significant to have an extensive amateur background, but the quality of opposition that you face also means something. I'm not saying it means everything. At the end of the day, amateur bouts are 3-4 rounds, depending on the period you were an amateur. But the experience you gain, traveling around the world, sometimes in hostile territory, not knowing who you're going to be fighting, in many cases having to deal with a lot of issues, psychological challenges, basically. This all grooms you and prepares you for the pro game. And of course, going in there, when you're an international amateur fighting at the highest level, you're not fighting journeymen. You're fighting guys who are the best in the world in many instances. So let's have a look at Michael Hunter's amateur record. Now, I'm sure this isn't his entire, well, let me not say I'm sure, but it's very possible that this is not his entire amateur record, okay? Because BoxRec are not as comprehensive when it comes to amateur bouts as they are with professional bouts, right? But it's certainly got a lot of his amateur bouts here. It's got 63 in total of his amateur bouts listed. Now let's start from the bottom here and I'll show you some of the people that he's fought. Some of the names you may recognize. Christian Hammer. Back in 2006, he actually lost that on points over 4. Tyson Fury, also that same year, 2006, England versus USA International tournament. I'm sure they still have those. Well, not over the past year and a half, but prior to the nonsense that's going on in the moment in the world, the England versus USA tournaments were still a regular occurrence, I believe. And Tyson Fury fought Michael Hunter in one of those tournaments. And Michael Hunter is adamant that he beat Tyson Fury in this fight. Officially, he lost it on points over 4. He's adamant that he should have got the stoppage over Tyson Fury, but the officials helped him. So, hey, that's his side of the story. He was recently in Tyson Fury's camp, by the way. And there's pictures of that online. I say camp, he was recently in the gym with Tyson Fury sparring and what have you. And there were rumors that it was him who gave Tyson Fury a bit of a black eye. Tyson Fury had some kind of mark on his face a few weeks back. So make it out what you will. I'd like to hear Tyson Fury's version of events surrounding this amateur bout. But again, Michael Hunter is often dismissed as a heavyweight because he's, so small. He was fighting guys like Tyson Fury back in 2006. Huge guys. So going in there against a Deontay Wilder or any of these, Anthony Joshua, he's not going to be intimidated by their size. It's not anything new to him. He's been fighting guys that big for years and years. Okay. Another name here that you guys will all recognize is Andy Ruiz. He actually stopped Andy Ruiz in 3 rounds back in 2007. Okay, and I'm sure many of you already knew that, but some of you may have not. So Andy Ruiz is another top name there that he managed to, this time he beat him, stopped him. Oscar Rivas is another good scalp for Michael Hunter. He beat him on points back in 2008. What else we got here? Oscar Rivas. Roberto Camarel, of course. Top super heavyweight amateur for years and years. Fought AJ twice. Fought him in the World Championships and also in the Olympics. And Michael Hunter lost to him on points over 3 in 2009. Interestingly, Michael Hunter beat Andrew Tabiti in 2011 on points over 3 rounds. Who else have we got here? And Artur Beterbiev. He lost to Artur Beterbiev on points over 3. Now, the obvious thing to point out here is that other than Andy Ruiz and Oscar Rivas, all of the big names that you can pick out, and I'm talking about big names as a pro, because some of these other guys may have been big names in the amateur scene, but in terms of professional boxing, no. But the big names who are now professionals, with the exception of Andy Ruiz and Oscar Rivas, who's not a particularly big name, Rivas, but most people know him, Michael Hunter lost to everybody else, officially at least. And people will point to that and say, well, look, he can't be that good. He's losing to most of the top names that he's fighting. And that is definitely a valid point, but he's not getting cleaned out by them, is he? And he's competing with them. And it's only 3 and 4 round bouts. When you've got a guy who's speedy, like a Michael Hunter, who can move around the ring fast, who's a good combination puncher. A guy like that, I mean, in one way I would say maybe amateur boxing would suit his style and ability a bit more because Michael Hunter hasn't always paced himself that well. But at the same time, when you're dealing with very, very big men, 6'7", 6'8", 6'9", 250, 60, 70 pounds, they don't hold their shape that well over the course of a 12-round bout. So if Michael Hunter's shape breaks down a bit over the course of 10 or 12 rounds, that happens or tends to happen even more so for real big men. I mean, look at Tyson Fury versus Vladimir Klitschko in round 10, 11, and 12. Tyson Fury's shape wasn't the same in those championship rounds, 11, 12 anyway, the championship rounds, as it was early in the bout. And that's going to happen to some degree with all fighters of all weights, but it's even more pronounced at heavyweight. Much more difficult for a big guy like that to retain his shape than it is for a welterweight. And the difference is not going to be as big, but I would say a guy like Michael Hunter would retain his shape better, generally speaking, than a giant heavyweight like a Tyson Fury, an Anthony Joshua, a Deontay Wilder, at least in a tough fight where you have to expend a lot of energy. So over the course of a longer contest, Michael Hunter might actually be able to, have some type of advantage by way of being able to retain his shape and that extra speed, allowing him to land cleanly on these big men. So, yeah, that's just my take on it. I'm sure the comment section of this video is going to be full of people insulting Michael Hunter, calling him a ducker, saying that he's full of it, and they'd be absolutely right to do so. But nonetheless, I still believe that he's a dark horse in the heavyweight division. Do I believe that he would stop Deontay Wilder early? No, I don't. But do I believe he'd have a good chance of beating Wilder? Maybe on points? Yes, I do. Leave your thoughts in the comments below and let me know how you feel. Come and join me on Patreon and access my weekly no-holds-barred, censorship-free podcast where we lift the lid on a wide range of controversial topics. It's not mainstream friendly, it's not politically correct, but that's the whole point. We dare to stand as a beacon of reason against an army of insanity. Just head on over to my Patreon page and select the tier called Hatman Hot Topics. You'll gain access to a minimum of 2 hours of exclusive content every single week, including podcasts, videos, interviews, live stream Q&A sessions, as well as my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. Not to mention a vast back catalog of hundreds of hours of previous episodes. You can listen via the Patreon app with the option to download in high quality MP3. We've also got a Discord server where you can come and chat and hang out with myself and other members. There's no contract, no commitment, and you can cancel at any time. So come and join our community of free and critical thinkers by signing up with me here on Patreon today.